Hi everyone. This video covers the highlights of Descartes' second meditation, and I will leave a link down below to this website that I'm using here on the screen. So let's go ahead and jump in. Descartes says, "The meditation of yesterday has filled my mind with so many doubts that it is no longer in my power to forget them, nor do I see, meanwhile, any principle on which they can be resolved." So in the first meditation, Descartes was talking about what he could be certain of, what he must doubt. So he applies this methodological doubt to all of his preconceived opinions in order to try to establish a foundation for philosophy and science. And so that's where we are left off at the end of the first meditation. And here at the second meditation, he's going to continue his journey to try to identify something that he can be absolutely certain of. He says, "I will nevertheless make an effort and try anew the same path on which I had entered yesterday, that is, proceed by casting aside all that admits of the slightest doubt." So keep in mind, his purpose here is to find something that he's absolutely certain of. He needs a foundation, he thinks he needs a foundation of knowledge or philosophy that is 100% certain. So he's going to try to remove everything else that can be possibly doubted. So in the first meditation, he removed his memory, his sense perceptions, and even his belief in God. All of these things he threw out of the window because he thought he could doubt them. And he wanted to find something that was immune from doubt. He continues, "I suppose, accordingly, that all the things which I see are false or fictitious. I believe that none of those objects which my fallacious memory represents ever existed. I suppose that I possess no senses. I believe that body, figure, extension, motion, and place are merely fictions of my mind." So, does he really believe that these things are just fictions of his mind? I don't think so. But remember, the purpose he has here in the meditations is to find a philosophical foundation. So it's just an experiment that he's going through to try to identify what is the sure foundation for the sciences, and it's not an actual excuse to start doubting your senses. Students can sometimes be confused about that. He says, "Doubtless then I exist, since I am deceived, and let him deceive me as he may, he can never bring it about that I am nothing, so long as I shall be conscious that I am something. So that it must, in fine, be maintained, all things being maturely and carefully considered, that this proposition, I am, I exist, is necessarily true each time it is expressed by me or conceived by my mind." So this is the cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. So he is talking about being deceived by God or the evil demon out there somewhere. And he says that try as he might, he can try to deceive me about the things that I perceive, but he cannot deceive me about my actually being deceived or thinking. So he thinks that doubt itself is proof that something exists, and that is himself. He's certain because he is thinking that he actually exists, or a thinker exists, but he identifies that thinker as himself. He continues, "But I do not yet know with sufficient clearness what I am." So for the rest of this, or at least part of this meditation, he's going to explore his own nature, the nature of the self. He says, "In the first place, then, I thought that I possessed a countenance, hands, arms, and all the fabric of members that appear in a corpse, and which I called by the name of a body. It further occurred to me that I was nourished, that I walked, perceived, and thought. In all those actions I refer to the soul." So he continues, "Can I affirm that I possess any one of those attributes of which I have lately spoken as belonging to the nature of the body?" And he concludes, "I find none of them that can properly be said to belong to myself." In other words, he can't be absolutely certain that he has arms, hands, legs. It's possible, again, going back to the first meditation, that he is just dreaming and only thinks that he has these things. He continues, "What about the powers of nutrition and walking?" But he says, If it be true that I have no body, it is true likewise that I am capable neither of walking nor of being nourished. So what about perception, he says? And he says, perception too is impossible without the body. Then what about thinking? He says, thinking is another attribute of the soul that he thought he had, and he concludes here, quote, I discover that what properly belongs to myself, this alone is inseparable from me. I am, I exist, this is certain. So now he has arrived at this absolutely certain foundation, this self-perceiving, thinking self, and he says, I am therefore, precisely speaking, only a thinking thing. Okay, moving down a bit, he's expanding on this, but then he says, what am I? What is a thinking thing, he says? It is a thing that doubts, understands, conceives, affirms, denies, wills, refuses, that imagines, also perceives. So he's building upon this foundation now, and he says, well, if we have a thinking thing, if I am a thinking thing, then I must also be able to do all these other things, doubt, understand, deny, imagine. All of these things are activities of the mind. He continues, but nevertheless, it still seems to me that I cannot help believing that corporeal things exist. So by corporeal things, he means external objects like his body or things out in nature. So he's going to explore this now and whether he can understand these properly. By using this example of a piece of wax, he describes this piece of wax that comes in a hard form. You can feel it, touch it, smell it, but when you apply heat to it, it changes in all these ways. And so the question then is, how can I know that the piece of wax is the same before and after applying heat to it? And he says it doesn't come from one's senses, because I have no, prior to heating up the wax, I don't have the sense experience of the wax being in this other way. He also says it can't be, so he has three categories of the mind here. He has sense perception, he also has imagination, and he has judgment or the intellect or reason. So he has these three possibilities he suggests. He says he can't know that something in nature is the same or carries its identity through time, through change, through the senses. He says he can't know it through imagination because he doesn't have the ability to imagine all the possible ways that this thing could be transformed. Therefore, since it's not one of those first two, it's got to be this third idea, which he identifies as the mind alone. And it's not really clear to me exactly what's going on here in his mind when he says it's the mind alone that perceives this piece of wax. He described, this is where the Descartes' so-called clear and distinct ideas come into play, but somehow he thinks that he can intuitively perceive things as they are in themselves by just applying his mind to them. At least that's part of the act of perception or knowing things in the world. So he describes it like this: when I distinguish the wax from its exterior forms like hardness or color or smell, and when, as if I had stripped it of its vestments, I consider it quite naked, it is certain. So you know something clearly and distinctly when you can remove all of these so-called secondary properties from it, color, smell, and see only the primary qualities of the thing, things like extension or how it takes up space. So Descartes thinks that we know things in the world not just through our senses, but primarily through this sort of rational insight or intuition. He says, to wrap up this meditation, it's now manifest to me that bodies themselves are not properly perceived by the senses, nor by the faculty of imagination, but by the intellect alone. And since they are not perceived because they are seen and touched, but only because they are understood. I hope you found that helpful.